Hello and welcome to our monthly webinar on Zoho Overview and Best Practices. This is going to be on analytics, and I'm Brett Martin and I'm here with Tyler Colt, and today we're going to dive into everything you need to know to get started using Zoho Analytics. We're going to talk about business insights, why you need it, why you want it, give you a quick overview of Zoho Analytics. We're going to talk about getting the data into Zoho Analytics using various data connectors, how to set those up, and then how to make those reports and build the dashboards that you need to look at and analyze the information that you want to see. So before we get started here, let's just talk about why you need business insights. It's pretty simple. There are three kind of basic steps that you need when you're making sense of your data. You got to collect your data, and this can be through just information you maybe have on your clients, website visits, social media, you name it. Data is everywhere. You can't get out of the way of it. Well, once you get all this data, what are you going to do with it? Well, you need to apply analytics to it. And once you've applied those analytics, you need to go ahead and interpret those insights. Data really is completely useless unless you're able to look at it and make sense out of it. And that's what Zoho Analytics is going to do for you. So some real world applications. Let's say you wanted to know about your website visitors and what they were doing. So, your data might show you that you have 2,000 visitors that have come in over the next 30 days. But what's kind of important about that data is, when do they come in? What are they looking at? What pages do they visit? How long do they spend on those pages? All of those kind of things. And if you analyze that data and you get that kind of feedback, you're able to really kind of tailor that overall visual and user experience when they come to your website. You know where they're spending their time. Maybe you need to beef that area up a little bit. If they're on a page just for a second or two and it's a page you feel they really need to spend quite a bit of time on, clearly the messaging you have on that page isn't very good and you need to change it. So it's kind of some real world, just looking at a basic thing such as a website. So there's so much you can do. And Tyler's really going to go into some other really useful examples of that as well today. So what can you do with Zoho Analytics? A ton. And we're going to cover a lot of these, but ranking reports, best to worst, we kind of talked about that. What pages are doing good, what pages are doing better. What if analysis, what if I made this change to my business? How would that generally affect things down the line? Executive dashboards, these are big ones. Let's pull in data from a whole bunch of different data sources. I want to know some stuff that's going on in CRM. I want to know things that are happening over in Zoho projects. I want to look at Zoho Finance and maybe the books that are coming there. Maybe I want to know at Zoho Inventory. And I don't want to go to all those individual apps to look at that information. I want it all in a central dashboard. Well, the way you can do that is through Zoho Analytics. You can pull in from all these various data sources and present it in a really nice integrated dashboard that gives you a snapshot of your entire business. And then you can also do these really super nice interactive reports. So one of the nice things on the interactive reports is, maybe it's a commission report. Maybe, you want something, you want to be able to look at a report and dive back and say, what's the last month look like? What's the last 6 months look like? Maybe it's a projection report. What do I look like for the next 3 months or the next 6 months after that? You want to filter by region. You want to filter by sales reps. You want to filter by territories. However you want to do it, these interactive reports gives that ability to filter and look at your data like that in real time. Now, this webinar actually was recorded earlier in the week, and we had some recording issues. So we're redoing this for you so that those of you that are watching this on the YouTube channel and on our website actually are having a nice, beautiful, seamless experience, because the original one wasn't that way. So during that last webinar, we did a whole bunch of live polls and we had a Q&A. So we actually threw those into this re-recorded, this version of the webinar as well. So our first poll was, how many people use BI software? And of the people that actually voted on the webinar, it looks like it's about a 50-50 split, 26-21, close enough. And so you've got a whole bunch of people using it, those that aren't. So, this webinar really is tailored to either one of those audience. So we're pretty sure you'll find it valuable. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, and he's going to kind of go through analytics, a whole overview, what Zoho Analytics looks like, what that dashboard looks like, and what you'll see when you dive in and look at the application. Tyler, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. So first we're going to kind of kick off just with a walkthrough of Zoho Analytics. And one of the reasons we wanted to include this is because a lot of people, when they log into analytics, it's a little bit overwhelming, right? Just looking at all the different UI elements. So we wanted to break it down a little bit and show that, once you know where everything is, it's really not that scary. So when you log into analytics, right, you're going to drop in on a home page here. So we're looking at a home page that already has a workspace set up here in the little red box. And basically all that a workspace is a central place where you can point all of your data, right? So you could point your CRM data, your Zoho Finance data, and your Zoho Projects data all to one workspace where you can then report on it there all together. Also on the home page is a quick view of your dashboards. So again, the dashboards are where you can group up multiple reports onto one page and see them all more quickly and easily. And so you're able to actually quickly access those dashboards right here from the homepage without even going into a workspace or going any further. And then lastly, you can see any of your recent items, so things that you've accessed recently, right? So if you looked at a data table, a report, or dashboard, any of those can show up here under your recent items. So now we're going to go ahead and access this workspace as, if you're building any reports or dashboards, that's where you're going to have to start. So when we click into that, it drops us in here on this Explorer page. So the Explorer page basically has all of your different folders. These folders can contain data, they can contain dashboards, and they can contain reports. So for example, if we were to go ahead and open up the dashboards folder, we see a set of standard dashboards that kind of come out of the box with Zoho Analytics when you integrate your CRM. Kind of covering a couple of these other tabs down the left-hand side of the screen. Under the data tab is where you'll see all of your raw data tables. So these are basically the different things that are synced into analytics in their raw form, right? So if you look at like deals inside your CRM, well, when you look at it from the CRM perspective, you see it behind the UI of the CRM. So they look like records and special list views and they're rolled up into reports in there. But as far as the CRM is concerned, or as far as analytics is concerned, pardon me, they're really just these spreadsheets of data. And so if we actually go ahead and click into, let's say, our deals table, we'll see that, it's basically just a spreadsheet of information, right? So you'll see some familiar fields there if you're a CRM user, like the deal name, the closing date, your expected revenue, right? All these different types of things that you may want to report on for a deal. But the whole power of an analytics suite is that we don't have to look at the data just like this. So over on the left-hand side, we can actually click on reports and see a whole suite of reports around our data. So these could be charts, like a bar chart. It could be pivot tables or summary tables, pipelines, all the different types of reports that you'd like to see. And so if we go ahead and pop one of those open, right, we'll see that it opens in a new tab up there at the top of the screen. And we have a nice little report here about our deal pipeline and the count of the count of deals in each of our different stages. Right, so this is kind of one report, but if we wanted to look at multiple reports on one page, then we'd go over here to the left and click on the Dashboards tab. And from that Dashboards tab, we can open up a dashboard, right? And so we've created a simple little demo dashboard here for the purposes of this little walkthrough, right? And on this demo dashboard, we can see that we actually have a report about the leads, right? Showing different lead counts based on their source that they came from, as well as a report here about deals. So that kind of highlights one thing about dashboards is they don't have to all be from the same data source. I could have a report on a dashboard about my leads and about my deals and even about my projects, right? All on one screen. But in order to actually create any of these reports, you're going to have to pull in some data. And the good news is Zoho Analytics has a robust suite of data connectors where you can do that quickly and easily. So I'm going to pass it back over to Brett here, and he's going to walk through a couple of the key ways where you can pull in your data and some of the pre-built connectors available in analytics.
So it's pretty straightforward. There are a lot of ways you can pull in your data. Most of you are actually probably going to be pulling data from other Zoho applications, and we're going to talk about that as well. But you can get it from files. You can just manually import it. There are feeds, URLs that you can actually real-time pull in data from. Cloud storage, if you have things in OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, over on Amazon S3, things that sit out inside SQL services. You can have cloud and local databases, and you'll want to pull that data in real time as well. So it really gives you this ability to not just pull in just CRM data and books data like I talked about earlier, maybe something from Zoho projects, but basically the ability to pull in any kind of data from any data source in most cases, and really mash that together and really make some sense of that kind of data as well. So let's talk about some of the specific data connectors. When you go to connect when you go to connect in analytics, like Tyler's going to talk about here in a little bit, you'll see that you've got an entire suite of connectors to choose from. Other CRMs are included. Almost every single Zoho app that you would want to pull data from, and they've added a whole bunch of them recently. All of your commerce applications, help desk applications, every single one of these has got a kind of pre-built connector for you. So you've got all these direct app connectors. You also have things around all of your social media as well. So if you're wanting to pull things in from Facebook, so Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, your Google ads, you're going to want to look at that data as well. And there's so much you can look at there, and you may want to compare that with your website traffic to see where things are coming in as well. Zoho Creator, People, all of these pre-built connectors are in there. So you've kind of got a wide variety of connectors to choose from. And we'll wrap up. There's kind of a last little bit here, where again, more of the social media, as well as pulling things in from Eventbrite. If you think of it, if there's not a connector for it, there's many other ways to get it in. We're going to have a question a little bit later on in the show about, hey, how could I get some data in from NetSuite? Well, there's third-party connectors out there that allow you to pull things into a SQL database. And one of the first things we talked about was the ability to kind of pull things real time from there. So if you've got some data, you're a little worried how you're going to get it out, odds are there's going to be a way that we can get that data for you and then run some nice analytics reports. And we also had a poll on what type of data people were looking to analyze. And kind of like I just talked about, most people are looking to pull data from both external sources as well as Zoho. Very few people just looking for external data sources. That makes sense since they're looking here at Zoho Analytics. But, the good news is no matter what kind of data you're looking to get, odds are you can probably pull it into analytics and then run some various reports on it. And so now Tyler's going to talk about how do you set up these connectors. Once you've decided the data that you want to pull in, how do you set it up? Tyler, take it away.
All right, thanks, Brett. So yeah, let's talk about setting up some of the connectors into Zoho. And so it might seem like this big, scary integration that you're going to have to do, but with the way that they set up the connectors, they're oftentimes really, really easy to pull in the data. So we're going to walk through some of the core ones around some Zoho applications that we see most often. For the CRM, for Zoho Finance, and then for Zoho Projects. So when you first create your instance of Zoho Analytics, you're going to drop in here on a very empty looking screen. And so we can see one thing you may want to do is up in the top, just verify that you're in the proper organization. So you should be, if you are the super admin for Zoho 1, you should be the account admin for this organization. And you can see that under this little drop down. So to actually go ahead and add a data connector, we'll go up to the top right here and click Import Your Data. We'll see a familiar looking screen here with a whole bunch of different options for data that we can pull in. So we're going to start with the CRM. And one thing to take note of is that if you're going to pull in a couple different data sources and one of them is going to be the CRM, you want to start with the CRM. You can't pull it into an existing workspace. It actually has to create its own when you import it. So though I can have Zoho CRM and Zoho Finance in the same workspace, I just have to start with the CRM. So when I click this Zoho CRM button, it's going to pop up a little screen here where I can define how this sync should look. So on the left-hand side here in the box, we have the different modules which we can choose to sync in, right? So we could choose leads and accounts and contacts and deals. And then over on the right, we have the different fields that we'd like to pull in from each of those modules, right? So these are just all the different data points that you're capturing inside of your CRM, inside of those modules that you have selected. And down here at the bottom, we can choose how often we want this sync to be. So you could choose either 3 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours, or 24 hours. And you can even choose what time of day those syncs should start. So sometimes that can matter because let's say I wanted to email out a scheduled report on, Friday at 5 p.m. I may want to schedule this to make sure that I have a sync that happens at 4:45 p.m. so that when that email goes out, we have the most accurate and up-to-date data possible. So though it seems a little trivial, sometimes timing those syncs can actually have an impact if people are going to be looking at this at certain times of day. And once we do that, all we need to do is hit that create button down at the bottom, and then it'll populate our workspace with those data tables. So we see we have ones for accounts and contacts, deals and leads, and then our users as well. And so to add another source, we're going to go ahead and pop into the data sources tab, which is in the little red box there down in the bottom left. When we click that, it'll show us a quick summary of the sync that we just created, right? So we see that we have a successful sync of data. It'll tell you when the last sync happened, when it's going to happen again, right? And it'll give you a little bit of information about the status of each of the specific tables that you're syncing in through that connector. Now up here in the top right of the screen, we can go ahead and click the Add Data Sources button. And that'll drop us back into this same screen with all those different sources, with the one minor difference that the CRM is no longer there. And so if we go ahead and click Zoho Finance, it'll pull up a similar looking screen, right, where we can choose our modules and our fields, and then how often and when we want those syncs to go ahead and take place. So from this screen, once we hit create, it's going to add another data source into this data sources tab. And we can see that it's actually showing that this Zoho Finance sync is still in progress. But the nice thing is we don't have to wait on that sync to be done to add another data source. So now we're going to go ahead and add that data source and select Zoho Projects to kind of complete the loop here of sales, finance, and project management all into one workspace. And so we wanted to highlight Zoho Projects because it's a common target for analytics, but it works just a little bit differently than a lot of the other connectors. So we'll see here that rather than modules and fields, it's giving us projects and modules. So Zoho Projects actually allows you to sync only specific projects into analytics if you wanted to do that. But most of the time, people are going to want to pull in every project that they have, as well as any new projects. So to do that, we just need to make sure that down here in the red box, we have the import new projects automatically and retained archived projects checkboxes checked. And that'll make sure that any new project data is going to be pulled directly into analytics. And then down below there, we just need to choose which modules we need to sync, like our milestones and tasks and timesheets if we want to track employees' time, and then go ahead and click create. And once we do, we'll have a nice little data source screen here that shows our successful syncs from Zoho CRM, Zoho Finance, and Zoho Projects. And so now that we have our data all connected into analytics, we're ready to start creating reports. So we're going to walk through a few simple examples of reports that we may want to create that'll help us highlight, many of the functions around the creation of reports. So from this Explorer screen, kind of our jump off point here for doing any work in analytics, we can go up to the top left and click that Create button. And so this is kind of the one Create button to rule them all, right? So if we wanted to create a new data table where we'd be manually entering some data, we can do that from here. For the more development focused out there who may be watching, you can also create query tables from right inside of here. So it has a full SQL suite where you can do all of your joins and data formatting. And then down below, we have our different options for reports. And so those chart views, it's showing a bar chart in the little icon, but that actually contains all of the different chart options. So when we go ahead and click that chart view, it'll give us the choice of what table we want to choose to report on in this report. So it's defaulted here to accounts, but let's say I wanted to make a report about our leads. So when I click this drop down, it's going to show me every single different table that I can use to create a report. So when I scroll down and select leads, we'll see that get replaced here in our base table. And then once we click OK, we're ready to start creating our report. So the first thing we generally want to do is go ahead and name this report so that, once we save it, it'll make sense for us to be able to find it later. So let's say that we wanted to make a report about leads by their source, right? Kind of a common report that we've seen a couple times in this webinar already. So we'll go ahead and give it a title for leads by source. And then down here below that, we have all the different places where we can load in our data. So we have an x-axis, a y-axis. You can color code or color block different types with the color field. You can add text overlays with the text field, and size, affect the size of different report components with the size. And then of course, anything that you want in your tooltip, when you hover over a different report element, you can load into that box on the right there for include columns for the tooltip. Then over here on the left-hand side of the page, we have all of the different fields which we can use from that table for creating our report. So let's go ahead and drag a couple fields in. So we've chosen our x-axis to be lead source, and we see that across the bottom of the screen. And then our y-axis is just a count of the leads in each of those sources. So you'll notice that we're counting the lead ID here. That's generally a good practice because we know that the lead ID is going to be unique, right? So if you're to choose something like last name for your count, you might have 2 Smiths, or you might have a duplicate record in there. But so these lead IDs are going to make sure that your count is as accurate as possible. And this is kind of a quick little view of creating a bar chart where you're going to want a different amount of counts based on these different sources. But what if we were making a report for leads by their status, right? So we could swap this out and make our x-axis lead status as we see here. But if we're looking at this, a bar chart's not really an intuitive report to report on leads by status, right? Because we really think about status like a funnel, right? It's more of a process where things move from status to status over time. So we may want to actually change the report type to something more like a funnel that'll make a little more sense and be more intuitive for looking at this data. So across the top of the screen, we have our little selections of different chart options. So as we see, it's defaulted to a bar chart. But over on the right-hand side, if we click this little arrow, we'll see more options for chart types. And so for something like leads by status, we may want to make that into a lead funnel. So if we click that funnel icon, it'll change our report right over to a funnel representation. But so when we're looking at this report, we may notice that one of these sections doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? So if we see here, this report's currently including lost leads in the middle of our funnel. Right. And so lost leads, generally, if we're going to look at a funnel report, we don't really care about the leads that have been lost, right? We can make separate reports around our lost rate and, why we lost these different leads. But if I just want to see where are active leads in the pipeline, we may want to exclude this. And so to do that, we can use one of the filters up here in the report. So once I click on this filter tab up at the top, it'll give me the option to drag in any columns that I want to filter on into that filters section in the red box. And once you do that, you'll see in the middle section all the different options that are in that field. So I went ahead and selected lost lead here. And then on the right, I can choose to exclude those items. Right, so now that I've added that filter in, we'll see that the report now just shows our active statuses and no longer includes the lost leads in our funnel. Now, the last thing that we may notice with this report is that the order doesn't really make sense, right? So it does its best guess and tries to assign them in an order that makes sense, but oftentimes we're going to want to edit that order just to make sure that it's totally in line with what we want to see. So if we choose the custom sort here at the bottom of this dropdown, it'll give us a list that we can rearrange into a proper order. So over on the right-hand side here, I've used these arrows to rearrange it into kind of a standard lead outreach order of statuses, right? From not contacted to attempted to contact, to contacting them in the future, then a pre-qualified lead and a contacted lead, right? And once we make those changes, we'll see that the report reflects it, right? So now we actually have a properly filtered pipeline that's only showing active leads. And then it's showing them from the beginning to the end of the process down the line on that funnel. And so the last report that we're going to touch on here is a summary report. And so these are a nice way to see a tabular view of data with different groupings and summary statistics. So up at the top of the screen here under the group by section are going to be where you would place things that you want to group by, right? So something like a lead source or a lead status is a good grouping, as well as, we might want to include a little bit of identifying information about the lead, like their name or email. Over here on the right-hand side is the summarize column, which is going to give you the ability to summarize data, either with a sum or an average or a maximum in relation to each of the items that we have on the report. So let's start off here by adding our grouping variables, right? So see, we're grouping by lead source, then lead status, right? And then we have some unique and identifying information like a last name and an email about each of these leads. And so we'll see here that this first two rows are both leads with the lead source of advertisement. So it's grouped them up in a left to right hierarchy where that advertisement grouping is applied to both of those leads. And now if we wanted to see something like the activities related to each of these and kind of see how many there are, we could drag in this activities count column into the summarize view, and then we'll see the actual count of activities open for each of these different leads. So if you're a sales leader, it might be important for you to know, how many leads do we not have any tasks or events or scheduled calls open for, right? And a report like this gives you a quick way to see that about each of your leads. And so now that we've got a couple different reports created, we're probably going to want to build them into a dashboard, right? Where we can see them all on one screen without having to navigate around analytics to see them individually. And doing that is probably even easier than making the reports themselves. So to actually go in here and create a dashboard, we're going to start on the Explorer screen. We're going to click that same Create button in the top left, and then we'll just be selecting one of our dashboards. So it's going to drop us into a screen here where we can actually drag and drop our reports directly into the dashboard. And on the left-hand side, we see a bunch of different folders that contain those available reports. So let's go ahead and expand this folder up at the top here for the Zoho CRM modules. And we'll see that we have our lead summary, our leads by source, and leads by status reports. So once I go ahead and drag and drop those into the screen, we'll see that all three reports are just quickly and easily contained on this one dashboard page. Right, so if I scroll down, we can see all of our different reports all contained here just on this one page. Now, kind of to wrap up our dashboard creation, there's one last special feature here around dashboards that is very, very, very useful for slice and dicing your data. And those are the user filters. So they're a little bit different than the filters that we discussed before in that these actually give the viewer of a dashboard the ability to filter on the fly. So once I click that Add User Filters button, it's going to go ahead and pull up all those different fields that I can use to set up those filters. So for this example, we're going to set up a filter for the timeline as well as for the lead source. And so once I check the boxes next to each of those fields, they go ahead and drop right into our user filters section, right? So now we have easy to access filters for the timeline and for the lead source value. And so once we're over here in the view mode for the dashboard rather than the edit view, we'll see that we have a drop down in our timeline, which is all about date specificity. And the way this timeline filter works is it actually applies a little bit of AI to try to guess an appropriate date field to use for filtering based on the reports and data that are in the dashboard. And then our other drop-down filter here is for the lead source, right? So all those different lead source options are available to be used as a quick filter. And the nice thing about these user filters on the dashboards is that they go ahead and apply to all of the reports. So if I were to go ahead and choose the advertisement lead source as our user filter, we'll see that our leads by source chart is reduced to just the advertisement column. And our pipeline and our leads by status pipeline and our lead summary are both trimmed down to only show leads that are in that specific lead source. So just with one filter, we're able to filter down the entire dashboard all at once. So moving on from that, we had our last little poll here be what our next webinar topic is going to be. This one almost came in with a dead heat here with Zoho Desk and Zoho Social. And so for our next webinar, we're going to be doing it on Zoho Desk. We're going to start there and then probably move on to Zoho Social on the next one after that.
Much to your relief, Tyler, it's a webinar where we both have expertise and you don't have to do the entire thing yourself. So that'll be good.
I think so.
And since we're now recording this afterwards, and it was picked that we're going to be doing Zoho Desk, I can let everyone know that that webinar is going to be on Tuesday, May 26th, and we'll be posting that link in the show notes for this as well.
Yeah, and then kind of to wrap out the end here, we had a nice little QA session with the webinar attendees. So we chose a couple highlighted questions that came up that we wanted to show for this recording as well. So let's get right into that here.
Yeah, so the first question is, what is the difference between these reports and analytics and the reports right in the CRM? Bottom line is the reports in the CRM are rather simplistic in many ways. They don't really let you filter data sometimes as you would like to see it filtered. They also limit you to the number of data sources you actually can aggregate. Really, you can choose your main module, then up to 3 additional modules over and above that. So you can't even pull in all the data from different areas and kind of report on those. There also can be a little bit messy. And again, they're limited to strictly the data that's in the CRM. So as Tyler's just explained, really with analytics, you can pull everything out of the CRM if you wanted to. You can do much more detailed, much more focused reports, and you can also add in other data sources.
Yep, and then moving on here, we had a question around pulling in data from something like NetSuite, right, that doesn't have an active connector into Zoho Analytics. And so for something like this, you want to use a third-party application. And these are generally like little SQL Server middle layers, right, like Skyvia or DevArt, where you can pull data out of NetSuite into your own database and then connect that through the SQL connector into Zoho Analytics. So it requires a little bit more of that middle layer, but it's still totally doable with some off-the-shelf products, again, like Skyvia and DevArt.
And these are interesting as well because you actually can even connect them to an Excel spreadsheet. They make a little application which will reside on your desktop, connected to the Excel spreadsheet, and it's pulling data live in real time. So really it becomes almost limitless the way you can get your data into Zoho Analytics.
And one more here around pulling in data from Facebook ads. You absolutely can. So it's actually one of those pre-built connectors that Zoho has that you can basically just turn on and be off to the races.
As well as Google Analytics and Google Ads and LinkedIn ads, all of those. So all of your advertising can be pulled in and you can analyze what's effective and what's not.
Yep, and then we had a question around aggregate formulas in analytics. So inside of analytics, you can actually make aggregate formulas inside of your reports. And the cool thing about aggregate formulas is you can run basically like sums and averages and maxes inside of these formulas and then apply them in bulk to all the different rows of your report. So an example of a use case of that could be something like, you know, if you had a bunch of different Google ads, right, and you wanted to track your click-through rate, right? So your sum of your costs divided by your sum of your impressions from those ads is going to be the most accurate way to calculate that click-through rate. And you would need to do that with an aggregate formula that kind of groups up all the data and runs it as an aggregate. Then we had one final question around, you know, kind of those standard reports that come out of the box with analytics when you set up connectors. And so someone had asked, if those are robust enough for kind of a basic baseline for BI reporting. And, it's kind of it's a mixed bag. So those reports work pretty well if you haven't done a lot of customization on the app that they're coming from, right? So like the pipeline reports from the CRM are going to be good if you haven't made, multiple pipelines or different deal layouts or, custom modules linked up to deals that have some key information that you need. But they are a pretty good starting point for customizations. You can take any of those basic reports and add additional values to them or filter them or change parameters. And they're kind of a good springboard for getting started with analytics, even if they don't exactly fit what you need right out of the gate.
And that's a wrap, everybody. We really appreciate you joining us today. Tyler, fantastic job. Thanks for carrying the load on this one. You can follow us over at our Twitter account, LinkedIn, Facebook. We'd love if you subscribe to our newsletter. And you can also follow us on YouTube by going to youtube.com/Zenatta. And be sure to listen to the CRM Zen Show. It drops every Monday on any basically application where you can get your favorite podcasts. And it's on YouTube as well.
Yep, you got it, Brett. So thanks everyone again for watching, and we will see you for our next video or webinar or podcast or whatever you choose to tune into. Thank you.